Good evening. This is my EDL 959 Module 5. We'll be evaluating formal and informal, culturally responsive and accessible assessments. To start, let's look at the value of assessments. There's a quote that says, "When assessment works best, it does the following. It provides feedback, helps educators set standards, evaluates progress, relates to a student's progress, and motivates performance." In short, it can provide valuable understanding for the teacher and the school as to where students stand in standards mastery and understanding the content. It's also a great piece of the roadmap of education. It's kind of the stopping points on this road trip that we take through learning, and they can be really valuable stops, or they can be not so valuable, depending on how they are used and the purpose that they play. We're going to be looking at 5 key topics: assessment versus evaluation, summative versus formative assessments, culturally relevant and responsive assessments, as well as student well-being and leadership. Our first category, assessment versus evaluation. To put it simply, assessment is the process used to improve a performance or outcome, while an evaluation determines the quality of that performance or outcome. So to put it even more simply, an assessment asks the question, was the goal achieved? Did it happen? Did we master it? While an evaluation looks at what can still be done to reach that goal. Both are very valuable and both have their place and can provide the best amount of feedback when used appropriately. So some of the similarities in assessment versus evaluation is you're collecting data with both. The data may be different in the sense of the purpose it serves you, but both create a sense of data that also creates a sense of judgment for you, the teacher, and the school in what is being assessed, how it's being taught, and what the outcomes are. In all, it shows whether learning is successful. If you have an assessment or evaluation that shows student mastery, student success, then you are generally on the right track. Whereas if not, then you as a teacher would need to reevaluate that. So some differences. Assessment has 4 components. It's measurement that's taking place over time. It should motivate students to study because it is a one-end result. It allows teachers to look at their teaching methods, and it ranks students on their capabilities. While evaluation has 5 components, it provides the purpose for the education system, identifies relevant information to how you're teaching and what you're teaching. It provides an opportunities for lessons and ideas to take place for learners. You analyze and interpret information for learners so you can pause and take a moment to reassess. And it helps manage classroom management and decision making for the teacher because you can pause and see where everything is taking place. In short, the assessment is diagnostic and it defines an area of improvement, while evaluation is judgment and provides an overall grade. Assessments are typically formative, while evaluations are typically summative, though those can be switched depending on the use of the tool and what you're hoping to gain from it. Ineffective assessments take place when students are expected to simply repeat information and not necessarily show what they are learning and how they're learning it. We are missing critical thinking, which is an important part of assessments. It is a tool that we need students to be able to have as they enter the workforce and college, because simply regurgitating information is not going to be effective. So how can we incorporate more critical thinking? We need to build in time and room for students to question, doubt, or wonder about a topic. This would include something like Socratic circles, philosophical chairs, but also simple times where students can feel comfortable enough in their environment to ask questions of the teacher or of their peers. They also need to be able to communicate these ideas that they have and these questions, so teaching them proper communication skills is important in doing this. Oftentimes, you, the teacher, will need to be the devil's advocate. A student can sometimes articulate an idea, but oftentimes it can be a one-track mind. So questioning them in response to their ideas is an important part of critical thinking. And we also need to build up our lessons and our goals as to be less about the right or wrong and more about these diverging questions and answers that help students develop their ideas, as opposed to, like I said, just restate something that already exists. Our next topic is looking at summative and formative assessments. Summatives are used to look at achievement It does not allow an opportunity for reflection. It is oftentimes just, this is the grade, this is what I know, and you're done and move on. While formatives look at a progressive, what did I learn this time? What did I not learn? What do I need to go back and look at? Opportunity to grow and apply that learning. Topic 3 is culturally relevant and responsive assessments. To define culture, you're looking at a student's history, but not just their racial and ethnic background, but also their history within their neighborhoods, their schools, their home. Many factors can play into this for students, and some of these factors are highlighted more for some students than for others. For best practice, we should know and understand our students and their cultural differences. What could work in a highly diverse community may not work for a less diverse community. So we need to be able to build our lessons and curriculum in order to better support the needs of our students and where they come from and what represents them. So what can we do? We can make assessments culturally relevant by including different tools. For example, if a student is from another country, I'm thinking about some of my students who have been new Americans and are learning the language and learning the customs, I should allow them to use dictionaries and thesauruses of their culturally relevant background, their language, to help decipher some of these things. We should allow students to share their stories and their personal experiences. This goes back to creating environments where students can share their ideas and have critical thinking. We need to allow opportunities for students to have alternate assessments, including projects and presentations that they develop to show their learning, not just ones that we, the teachers, create that they follow through on. We need to create an environment for students to be comfortable. This goes back to one of the big key terms in education is building relationships, and that's a big part of that. We need to create rubrics that are culturally responsive and ones that make sense to our students and their families so that they can understand what their students are achieving or not. And we need to provide opportunities for students to use their primary language and skills. This includes maybe if you have a lot of students who are ELL, specifically Spanish, let's say, or maybe you have a bunch that are I had a bunch of students from Somalia, creating rubrics and assignments that are created in their language can help them with that. Number 4 is student well-being, which is defined as cognitive, emotional, social, and physical needs. The question of, are these being met? Oftentimes with a physical need, we can identify that pretty quickly or over time with repeated notes of something. It's the cognitive, emotional, and social that we need to look at a little bit more because students with a stronger well-being can have greater academic and long-term professional success. This would include things like college or post-secondary careers, tech school, if you're going straight into the workforce, anything like that. A strong well-being makes stronger advocates and adults later in life. So what can we do? We can accentuate the positive, which is being a positive force in these students' lives and being consistent. We can give students a sense of purpose. This goes back to critical thinking as well, I think, in that if you give students the opportunity to voice themselves and voice their opinions, they have a sense of purpose and a sense of ownership in the classroom. With that, you can promote growth of academic skills that need to take place, looking specifically at standards or goals of the school. Going back to fostering relationships with students, but also with parents, and having that good family community as part of your classroom is important, which can also lend itself to behavior management. Simple disciplinary efforts where you kick a student out of your class or you call a principal every time something goes wrong may not be what the student needs to build their well-being. And then last is the perception of testing. This is not just in regards to students feeling as if they are constantly being tested, but also to students feeling like every time they take a test, it's going to end poorly. They might fail or something like that. So just changing the mindset around that can help students' well-being. However, we do need to provide more data on these well-beings, and this may differ from school to school or even class to class. So it's something that we as individuals need to take ownership of and accountability for, and understanding our students' well-being and helping them through to find success for themselves. The last category is leadership. The basics of leadership would be setting directions, developing people, and redesigning the organization. And it's broken up into 4 domains. The first is supporting, evaluating, and developing teacher quality. This would go back to teacher evaluations that take place annually. How can we as leaders help our staff members grow and develop so that they can help students grow and develop? Setting goals and assessments and accountability is another key to this. We need to be realistic, even though there are time frames, oftentimes benchmarks and state assessments that stronghold districts and leadership and administration into doing specific things. Resource management is another one. What's available and what can we still get to support our teachers in this? And then collaborating with other schools. If another school is doing something extremely successful, then we should all be looking at that and taking note of what we can do to build better. A quote that says most leaders contribute to student learning indirectly through their influence on other people or features of their organization. Basically, it's not just about what you as the leader do for student learning, it's what you do about all the components that fall into student learning, and we need to be able to harness those. So looking at my school, I decided to look at the strengths and weaknesses that my school district, specifically my school, has in regards to testing. I will preface by saying we have done minimal testing this year because of COVID and all the expectations with that. All we've done so far is one benchmark test, which has been great to see where students fall, excuse me, but it's also not a viable option as students who are virtual were not allowed to take the test because you could only access it on school grounds. So it's still not entirely useful, but it was also good to see where our students were at. Other strengths would be we work as teams, and there are team leaders that represent us on a bigger scale in larger meetings and things like that. And we do use summative and formative assessments throughout units to assess where students fall in standards mastery. Some of our weaknesses, however, is we do not have enough alternate testing. The district requires that every student has their make or their end result be the same. And that's not necessarily fair, especially when you're looking at culturally responsive. It's just not necessarily equitable or equal, I guess. Working as a team with a leader is also a weakness because there's sometimes some tension there, and sometimes these leaders are not necessarily selected or picked in the right manner. And then we're using the wrong or minimal use of cultural diverse texts and resources. I specifically stated this one because for example, my department had an issue early in the year. They wanted to pick a text solely because it was written by an African American man, though they had never read the book. And they claimed that as being culturally diverse. And while, yes, you're checking a box saying that this is written by an African American, if you haven't read the book, you don't really know what it's offering as far as cultural diversity. And I found that to be a huge hindrance for us in wanting to just be able to mark a box. We aren't looking at the value of that box. So these are the areas that I would say that we fall into. I definitely obviously think there's room for growth. However, this is my first year at this school, so I'm sure that in the years to come, I will be able to see more of this and see where we really fall kind of on this scale. Thank you for listening. Oh, these are my resources. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.